Welcome back to another episode of Unraveled and Rising podcast. If this is your first time, welcome. If you have come back, thanks for coming back. We appreciate you and look forward to seeing you and hearing you in the future. Leave a comment, like, and subscribe. We would love that. This is going to be an interesting episode because Kimberly and I wanted to talk about this a couple of different times. And this is going to be our opportunity to do that today. We really want to talk about the dementia wave and what's happening with dementia, especially in the U.S. I mean, it's happening everywhere, but we want to really talk about what's going on in this country and really what that looks like and how it's impacting us as individuals, as families, in communities, how it's impacting care for elderly and seniors and folks that have it, and how that really kind of impacts all of us in a way and sets a tone on maybe there's some ways we can improve it to be able to relate better to that community. So stay tuned for this very heartfelt discussion. As you guys know, Kimberly, thanks for coming on again, Kimberly, today.
Yes, glad to be here.
She's a dementia specialist, and so she has a lot of knowledge in this area. And I just think it's a great topic because with the aging population in the U.S., this is more and more of an issue. And what I liked, I did some research on this, and what I liked, the thing that stood out to me in the research, Kimberly, was that many caregivers are now in a sandwich generation, which is where they're aging for their parents, they're caring for their parents and their kids at the same time. So they're kind of like, so Kimberly, can you just give us a little bit of a background on kind of what's going on with dementia and what it is, just so people understand fully and maybe what to look out for if they start seeing things like this in their family?
Sure. So starting a little bit with the basics, dementia itself is an umbrella term that just encompasses all the different dementias. Teepa Snow has said that there is 121 different types of dementia that have been identified. The most common ones that we focus on and that we see and that I see in my work is Alzheimer's dementia, frontal temporal lobe dementia. That's the one that Bruce Willis has. Lewy body dementia, which is the one that Robin Williams had. Vascular dementia, which is a very popular dementia as well, and then mixed dementia. Those are the five most common ones that we see. They all have different ways that they present. Some overlap with presentation, but certainly prognosis, meaning how long somebody lives with those particular dementias, can vary pretty widely. I'd say Alzheimer's dementia, people can live with the longest typically. That can go anywhere from 4 years to, I've seen clients, live with it as long as 17, 18, 20 years. But on average, I'd say probably 4 to 10 years. Depending when they're diagnosed, we're also seeing more and more people being diagnosed with early onset of Alzheimer's. I've had clients as early as their late 40s, early 50s be diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's dementia. In the cases that I've seen of that, there is the hereditary component where mom has had it, an aunt has had it. Being hereditary doesn't mean that you're absolutely going to get it, but it is another predictor. Lewy body dementia and frontal temporal lobe dementia are a little bit more aggressive. So those are 2 to 4 to 6 years. Those are, they're much more rapid. They're much more aggressive. And unfortunately, they're generally more unpleasant to have to deal with. A person that loses, their frontal lobe and changes their personality, causes aggression, causes loss of words and, vocabulary. So it causes a lot of frustration. Those are definitely more challenging as a caregiver.
And when you say more aggressive and they got a lower prognosis or lifespan, is that because it's impacting their brain in a way that shuts down organs and they die, or how is it impacting them to where they don't last as long?
Yeah, so it tears through the brain very rapidly. And it just goes through it very rapidly. So it'll hit the frontal lobe and the parietal lobe and the temporal lobe, and it just is kind of like a ping pong going around in there and just deteriorating. Where Alzheimer's is a bit of a slower process of that. So this one is more aggressive. The frontal temporal lobe and the Lewy body also hit people that have more cognitive reserve. So, a client that we've had recently is a physician. So he's had more cognitive reserve, which has slowed his progress a bit. However, he's now towards the end and he's going rapidly. So it really, I just kind of think of it as a ping pong ball, just bouncing around in there and just putting hole after hole after hole, just doing damage more vastly and quickly.
Is there any known cause of Alzheimer's or dementia or anything like that?
Well, hereditary can be a part of it, but lifestyle is a huge factor. So, certainly having your blood pressure and your cholesterol under control is, something that you can at least monitor and potentially control. Environment is a huge factor, as well as, blood flow to your brain. So how often you move your body, how vigorously you do that, your heart rate variability, and diet and nutrition is huge. Ultra processed foods, our bodies don't know what to do with them. So they just kind of store them away in the fat. And then those the toxicities from that build up in our bloodstream and they affect our brain. Our brain is only 20% of our body mass, but it uses 80% of our energy. So our brain is, it's the drive, it's our hard drive. It really is. And you need to take care of the hard drive in order for everything else to work properly.
And so it's kind of the same things we already know, things to be healthy, move your body, eat well, get exercise, all the things that you're supposed to do anyway, you should be doing.
Right. And then, getting that brain stimulation and learning, and learning new things is helpful. So I know a lot of people, they, do Sudoku puzzles and crosswords, and those can be helpful, but it's more helpful if you're learning new things, because that, causes neuroplasticity, which gives your brain other avenues and other, circuitry, other connections. The other thing they're finding that saunas decrease overall mortality by 40%. So if you can get yourself, in an infrared sauna 4 days a week for, 40 minutes or something like that, that decreases overall mortality by 40%. I mean, that's huge.
I love hearing the bird in the background. The bird's like, I would like to be involved in this conversation, please.
Yes, she would. Let me tell you my take on dementia.
Yes, I think it's crap. Everything's fine.
Exactly.
And the other thing too, and so let's just kind of talk really about the human impact here, because it's changing how we communicate. It's changing how we see ourselves in the family, unit. It's changing maybe even how we perceive people and how we can work together and look at dementia in a different way, so that we're not just seeing it as a frustration or a stressor on us, but maybe finding ways. And again, I wanted to remind people too that Kimberly has an online course about this exact thing, where she talks about all aspects of dementia. We have that link in the show notes here if you want to look at that, because you can click over to Caring Minds, dementiacare.com. There's 2 courses she has there. One's an actual certification for anybody and also nurses, but there's also just a course that covers all different aspects of dementia. And it's an online course that you can take anytime you want. Can you talk a little bit about really kind of the impact that you're seeing? Because I know you're out talking on this subject a lot, Kimberly. Like, are you seeing an impact this is having on families and communities that you notice, or what are you seeing?
Well, absolutely. It's not just affecting, it's affecting caregivers, emotionally but also the financial impact of people that have to leave their jobs or take time off work, go on FMLA. Some people are getting let go of their jobs because they're not able to be attentive enough at their job. So, I mean, it's a huge impact. And then it's, there's also a huge stigma that goes along with dementia. And, a talk I recently did was about, what if dementia is really trying to teach us a different way to connect with people? We don't have to connect with words. We can connect with emotions. We can connect with our hearts. We connect with energy. There's so many different ways that we can connect with people that doesn't have to be verbal communication, and just looking at things a bit differently.
Yeah.
And having an open mind and having empathy and compassion and learning to just slow down. We're just, as humans, it's like if there is a moment of silence, we feel like we have to fill it with talking, and we don't.
They teach that in Toastmasters too. If anybody out there is in Toastmasters, they train you to take pauses and to not fill it with something like an ah or an or something, because that's traditionally what we do when we're speaking, is whenever there's a break or anything, we go or say an ah or an or something like that to fill the space, because we don't like those silences or those spaces.
It's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So it's getting comfortable with the uncomfortable.
You know what else I'm wondering too? Because I noticed, because I take care of my cousin Marcia, who's got dementia. She's in South Dakota, where I'm from. And I have caregivers and nurses that go in there. But you know what I've noticed about myself is I am more patient overall, because I've had frustrations with her when I lived there, and she would just call me out of the blue and want me to come over and help her with something. And I would just, and luckily I was in a small town, so I could just get up and go over there and be over there for, be over there in 5 minutes, and I'd help her with something or whatever. And then when I moved down to Texas, I had others, but she was calling me all the time. It was really frustrating for me. But you know what? Working with you for the last, for as long as I have now, it has changed my perspective on it. And so I'm noticing overall, I'm just a more patient person, because I'm understanding the perspective of her perspective of it. And I think because I'm training myself to have less frustration and just be there for her when she needs me, and have be open heart, if you will. And just when she calls me and she calls herself stupid, oh, I'm so stupid, I couldn't do. I go, you're not stupid at all, Marcia. Sometimes we forget these things. It's completely fine. And I just find myself being more patient. And I think that's impacting other relationships in my life, because I'm having that experience.
Right. So she's teaching you something, right? She's teaching you patience. She's, people with dementia, and I know we say this all the time, but it's true. They can only live in the present. That is it. And I know even myself, I'm always thinking about the next thing that I have to do, or the last thing I did and how I should have done that better. How often do we truly live in the present? But one of the gentlemen that I supported with Lewy body dementia, he's the one that got me to really see that. He said, the gift that dementia has given me is living in the present. And I thought, the gift that dementia has given you? Right. But he's so right. He said, I know I take the same walk every day. So I know I pass the same trees. I know that, but for me, every time I see it, it's like seeing it for the first time. So I have that awe and that gratitude and that appreciation, even though I do know that I took that walk yesterday, but I don't remember it.
Yeah.
So I remember it like it's new. So just to think of it, as a gift, and it's like truly it is. And someone with dementia, they can't change the way they are. So we, as caregivers, as families, as loved ones, we have to be the ones that change, because we have the ability to do that.
We do.
And they don't. So, having that empathy, having, like you said, having patience, and it's a moment in time, even an emotion comes and goes in 90 seconds. So if you get frustrated, just hang on for 90 seconds. It's going to pass.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Is there any, does it affect women more than men, or is there any statistics on gender and it affecting gender?
For Alzheimer's, it does affect women more so than men, but they also believe that that has to do because of that cognitive reserve, because at least up until, now, I think we're going to see a shift because there are more women that are working and more women that are out in the workforce.
Yeah.
But prior to that, in the boomer generation, which the 10,000 that we're seeing that are turning 65 every day now, oftentimes the women stayed home. So they didn't have as much of that cognitive reserve as the men did. Now, Lewy body and FTD, we're seeing more of an uptick in men with this type of dementia. The other dementia I forgot to mention was Parkinson's dementia. And actually Parkinson's disease itself and Lewy body dementia are often misdiagnosed as one or the other because they are so similar, because the parts of the brain that it affects their motor skills. It affects their speech and kind of that delayed speech. So, but fortunately now there are blood tests that you can have. There are skin punches, skin biopsies that they can do for diagnoses. There is spinal taps, which, no one really wants to have, one of those. But I mean, there are ways of identifying the type of dementia that you have. And a lot of people will say to me, well, what do I care? Well, the reason you care is because you want to have a trajectory. Is this going to be in my life? I mean, we don't have a crystal ball, but is this something we're going to be dealing with for 15 years? Or is this going to be 4 or 5 years? Yeah. And when you're trying to make financial decisions too for caregiving, or do we put them in memory care? And there's only so much money, having that diagnosis can be very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too what's the statistic, Kimberly, of the caregivers that are taking care of those with dementia, like their death rates compared to others?
Yeah, so 40% of caregivers die before the person they're taking care of if their loved one has dementia. In anything outside of dementia, it's 30%. I mean, it's an astonishing number. And that's because they stop taking care of themselves because they're giving so much to everybody else. And it's typically women that are the caregivers. So we're dying before our husbands or before that man that we're taking care of. Another statistic I saw recently about Parkinson's was that, women are dying earlier with Parkinson's disease. And what they're finding, even though men get it more commonly, it's because the men then are the caregivers and they aren't as well equipped to be caregivers as women are. So we need to, set our men up for success because they may need to be our caregivers.
Right. Absolutely. I've always thought I'm in big trouble because I only have a son, so I don't have a daughter. And they always say if you have a daughter, the likelihood of you being better taken care of is there, but I don't. So I'm in big trouble. I'm going to have to adopt a daughter somewhere.
Make sure you got a long-term care policy so you can afford to go somewhere.
That's right. Yes. So this is, to me, I think when we started this conversation, Kimberly, I think you and I, we kind of touched on it a little bit, but I think we were thinking about this as maybe a culture wake-up call.
Yeah.
What we're dealing with right now, that it's kind of forcing us to rethink what we value, our productivity and basically, aging and independence versus, interdependence, really. I mean, like our independence, but also how we see and the family unit itself. Because I think it's becoming more and more common too to have just your family members live with you. I think that in certain cultures that has kind of always been a thing, but I think for some cultures that was not really a thing. But I think it's becoming more and more common that families live together. You're bringing your mom back into the house, or your stepmom, or your mother-in-law, or your father-in-law, or whatever, bringing them back into the house. and dealing with that. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, depending on if you're taking care of them full time or if you have caregivers in. But I kind of see this as a wake up call of how it's teaching us, just like you said.
Well, and the other thing that I forgot to mention, that's probably one of the most important things, is getting enough sleep. Because when we sleep, that's when our brains go through a cleaning process. And if you're not getting enough sleep, and your brain and that cerebral spinal fluid isn't able to do that full flush, that's when those amyloid and those tau deposits are going to be sticking. So, as much as we as a society, we're workaholics, or, we put 100% into our work, you need to put 100% into your rest too.
Yes.
And then also community. The other thing I see in dementia a lot of times is families tend to isolate because they're embarrassed. So we're talking about the stigma again. So they tend to, isolate their loved one. Well, that's not good for the person with dementia, and that's not good for you as a caregiver either. Yeah. You need to get support. You need to be out and help learn things from other people that are going through something similar.
Yes. I love that. And I think you do a support group, don't you, Kimberly? Don't you have a support group?
I do. Uh-huh. Yep. At the Golden Lodge. Yep. Third Tuesday of every month from 5:30 to 7, just something I volunteer and do for the group there. And it's really just to get people together to start talking about this stuff and to be supported. And I just did a talk earlier this morning on grief. And a lot of that too, we talk about, how when you're grieving, you tend to isolate yourself. You do all of the things that you really need to bring in community. But then we also talked about how sometimes people say things that really are not helpful when you're grieving, like everything happens for a reason. And this too shall pass, and things like that. When I think of grief, and with dementia, I mean, it's ambiguous grief and it's anticipatory grief. You're losing somebody over and over and over.
Yeah.
You lost the person who they were. Maybe they were your mother. Now you're having to be their mother. So it's an identity reversal as well. Yeah. So, I mean, there's so many different areas of grief and times that you go through grief, not to mention then the time when they actually do pass, there might be a sense of relief. And then that also brings on guilt. Yeah. I mean, it's just.
And there could be a sense of relief at the beginning, but then once you really start mourning the loss of that person, that the person that that they were, or that you hope that they would be at the end or whatever, you kind of you start thinking about all that different stuff.
Right.
I think for me, when my mom passed, she didn't have dementia, but when she passed, I think it took me a good year before it really hit me.
Yeah.
Before it really, because I was just trying to keep myself busy afterwards. And then all of a sudden, I think it just hit me. And I went into a state of depression at that time, because I guess I didn't even really realize that's what it was. Now I know when I'm looking back on it, but at the time, I didn't realize it was a depression from that, or that it was grief from that. I thought it was just a general depression or something like that. I didn't realize it. So, that stuff can come up too.
Yep.
Starting the conversation. I think it's like having more conversations about it is what you are trying to do.
Yep. Having more conversations about it, and having it be the norm to be out at the store or be in a restaurant and have somebody with dementia be there. So what?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? These people should not have to live in isolation like they did something wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, this
is like not taking your kid that doesn't behave to the store. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Right.
You know what I mean? You don't want to do it. And I used to be really embarrassed if my son acted up in the store. So I didn't take him a lot of times, because I was just like, he's gonna act. But again, it's just me. That's all on me, right? It's me worrying about what everybody's thinking.
Right. The judgment and the stigma. And that's why I have the, little cards that I made up too for people that you can hand to a waitress or to the stewardess that just lets them politely know that you're a companion of somebody with dementia. So if things are said or done that are a little surprising, this is why, and please have patience with us.
I love that. Everybody should have that for children that have special needs or have issues with like some suicidal issues or something like that. It would have been so helpful if I would have had a card like that back in the day to be able to hand to a waitress or somebody to say, you know, and not make my son feel weird about it, but they
Right.
have understanding. That would have been huge. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's very, you know, it's very tactful. It's not,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? But them to go, okay, you know, because sometimes they will say things or act in a way that is inappropriate to the situation, but they don't know any better.
Yeah, they don't. You're
So instead of, you know, people avoiding you or walking around you, whispering behind your back, if, you know, you'd hope that if somebody knows, then they'll have some empathy.
Yes, absolutely. I love that. And then I think too, as far as like, if we start, if it runs in the family, I'm trying to think of a way to try to encourage people to be planning for this.
Yeah.
And I mean, estate planning and that type of thing is a whole nother conversation.
Yeah.
But just the conversation around, you know, you're in your 40s or whatever, and, you know, you're taking care of your kids, and you may be taking care of, you know, a parent or something like that, or even a grandparent, it could be. You know, is there a way for you to start planning when you're younger, not only just taking care of yourself to try to help it with your side, but planning, you know, planning for yourself for retirement? Because if it runs in the family, and the you know, maybe you should be planning, because you just don't know. I mean, we don't know, none of us know, but maybe what is the way to plan? Obviously saving money is important, but you know.
Well, and there are some, you know, Pressivity AD, that's a blood test that you can have now once you're 55, that it's got a 92% accuracy rate that would let you know if you're going to, now this is specific for Alzheimer's dementia, but it will let you know your percentage of getting Alzheimer's disease. So I've had clients that were diagnosed with MCI, mild cognitive impairment, which may or may not turn into Alzheimer's, but they were literally planning to sell their house, move to the West Coast to spend time, a couple of years living with his brother before he got to the point that he, you know, wouldn't be able to communicate with them. But before they did that, they wanted to know, well, geez, is this going to turn into it or not? And it came back with a 92%, you know, rate that he was going to get Alzheimer's dementia. So that to them was enough confirmation for them to go ahead and make those plans.
What's the name of the blood test again?
It's Pressivity, PRECIVITYAD for Alzheimer's disease. Now you have to get that. It's just a simple blood test that, you know, a lot of neurologists will have that in their office. Some of them are a little weary of doing it if you don't have symptoms. But the thing with dementia, you're doing the damage decades, 20, 30, 40 years before you're going to get dementia. So it's, you know, sometimes you have to really kind of push your doctor. And this would be, to me, and then there's also testing that they can do to see if you have the genetic genes for dementia. And if you have, you know, I think there's 3 or 4 different ones. And if you have 2 of them, then there's a good chance you're going to get it.
Gotcha. Okay. That makes sense.
But yeah, but there are also, like I said, the lifestyle things, the environmental factors that you can do to help minimize that and maybe not flip that switch.
Absolutely. And I thought like I said, I did some research on this, and I thought things that we can do, and these are just recommendations that came out when I did the research, but you could comment on this. You know, learn the early signs, plan legally and financially, and build a care network before the crisis kind of hits. And then offer caregiver-friendly policies, flexible scheduling, and support groups. So if you have somebody on your team or that works for you that has a family member or a loved one that has dementia, maybe setting up some flexible scheduling, or having people, you know, how you can have people come in and actually do talks at your work and have a lunch and learn. You could have somebody come in and talk about it, and, you know, just providing support to them, I think, is a good thing. For communities, it could be, you know, you're advocating for dementia-friendly cities, you know, like different things that are dementia-friendly in communities. I don't know, maybe you could talk about that, what that would even mean. I'm not sure.
Well, so in some other countries, like even their memory care communities are just that. They're actual communities that have like a downtown area and the housing around it. And they can go to the little grocery store. They don't need money. They don't need anything. There's a hair salon. There's things that they would have and need in their regular day. But this is all, maybe on several acres that they can go to and can be a part of. So I know they're trying to, I think actually there's one in Texas that they're trying to build now.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I know there's been some talk about some tiny home communities, about doing some of that too, because, they'd have kind of their own place at least, but then have, caregivers that are on site that can help meet their needs. And again, that's going to depend on where they are in their dementia journey. Can they really be alone? How much is it affecting their mobility? And none of these things are inexpensive either. So It's getting that long-term. 75% of people that have long-term care policies use them. So if there's a question, I would say get it. And the younger you get it, the less expensive it's going to be.
I'm writing this down. I'm just taking a note right now.
Yeah.
Because I don't have it.
Yeah.
I used to. I had when I worked for somebody else, but now since I've worked for myself, I don't. But I need to.
Yeah.
And then I think for individuals, it said that kind of shifting your mindset to, not of fear, but of compassion and empathy, and thinking how you can change something we've already talked about, how you can change what you're doing to better communicate. And the energy is a big one.
Absolutely.
I was talking somewhere else. This book I read, and this isn't about dementia, but it was about a stroke victim. My Stroke of Insight is a book that I read a long time ago. And the thing that always stood out to me in that book was her being able to read the energy of the nurses and the doctors that came in the hotel or the hospital room. Yeah. And she would talk about it. And if they would touch her foot when they were in there, even though she couldn't communicate, but if they would touch her foot, she felt so much better. And just if she could, she wanted people to come in there to have this wonderful energy. And I think that's good advice for all of us in any situation, not just with the dementia care, situation, but understanding what your energy is. And you can change your energy just by, kind of being present before you go into a situation, doing some breath work, maybe meditating for a couple of minutes. Heart coherence meditation is really good for that. Getting you back to your heart versus your head, and you can go into a situation with better energy. I think that's always a good thing. Did you have any other thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, and just that, communication can be through, like you said, through touch, through holding a hand. And sometimes it's even in the silence. There's communication in silence by people's eye movements, the grimacing of the face, the nonverbal, if you're walking up to somebody. And that's why a lot of times with dementia clients too, it works very well if you always want to say your name, and if you put a hand out, because most people instinctively know that a handout means a shake and is welcoming.
Yeah.
So I even tell, my clients' families, when you call your loved one, don't assume that they know who you are. Hi, Mom, it's Kimberly. Just so they don't have to guess, so they don't have to be embarrassed. Just simple little tips and tricks like that can make things so much easier for them, because they still know that they're not at their capacity. They're not where they used to be. Yeah. So they get embarrassed as well. So what can you do to help minimize that for them?
Yes, love that. Absolutely love that.
And one of the examples that I use, because people are like, worried about, some of the signs of dementia, so one of the analogies I use is let's say, so walking out of the mall, you forgot where you parked your car, is very different than you forgot that you didn't bring a car or that you don't have a car. That is a very different situation.
Yeah.
Because I forget where I put my car all the damn time.
Me too.
I got to take a picture usually, But if you don't remember that you didn't bring a car, now that's a problem.
Yeah.
And another one.
Forgetfulness is very different than just forgetfulness is very different than people assuming that they've got dementia or Alzheimer's or whatever. Yeah.
Right. But a lot of people will, assume that. You also have to look at the amount of stress you're under, because when you're under stress, your frontal lobe shuts down. So you're not able to think straight. Yeah. So if you're under a lot of stress, give yourself some grace. And when it really becomes an issue is when they're no longer able to take care of their activities of daily living. They don't know how to brush their teeth anymore. They don't know what sequence their clothing goes on. They're trying to put their underwear on over their pants, different things like that. And they also lose temperature control. So it's not uncommon, because I have people tell me all the time, it's 90 degrees outside and he's putting on 4 sweatshirts. Well, he doesn't have that temperature control anymore. So that's where you've got to intervene, because we don't want him to overheat just because he doesn't realize that he's, too hot. But I mean, those are more, forgetting where you put your keys. That doesn't mean you have dementia.
Yeah.
I just tell people, have a place that you always put your keys. That's what I have to do. I've got ADD. If I don't put if my keys aren't where I normally put them, I have no clue where they are.
And now you can put a little tag on them and you can find them wherever they are. You know what I mean? From your phone or whatever.
Yep. Put a tag in the shoe, whatever you've got to do. But I mean, it's the big things. It's the big things.
100%. Love that. And I think like you said, I just feel really reflective on the fact that, it's teaching us about ourselves. It's teaching us how we treat each other. It's teaching us how we can be different. I just think that not that that's what, it's a natural evolution of people and toxins and how our bodies work and all of that. But I really do believe that it's teaching us about ourselves.
Yeah, it's teaching us compassion, empathy, patience, all of those things. Sometimes it feels like a kick in the teeth. It's not just about the
youth anymore. I think you've said this too, Kimberly. If we look at dementia in a different way, I think we're such a youth-focused, society where everything is better because if you're young. And I just don't think that's true. I believe that we have, I've always been the kind of person that enjoyed hanging out with elderly people. I've always been that person. I used to go play bingo with the old ladies, and 20 years ago, and I loved it.
Yeah.
I enjoyed that. So I think I have a little bit of an old soul to myself, but I've enjoyed having conversations and hanging out with older people. And I think there's so much to learn. And we think as young people, we know everything and they don't know anything. But I'm telling you, the life experience, most of the situations that we put ourselves in are very similar to what everybody else has already done. We just see it's different because we've got technology now or whatever. But relationships and marriages and kids and rearing, all that stuff is the same.
It's
the same experience. So you can learn, and I would recommend even going and volunteering at a facility or something if you can, and really just going and don't be scared, because I used to be really scared to go into nursing homes and stuff. I used to be really scared of it. I used to be scared of the people, and I thought that it was just weird or whatever. But now that I've spent time in the nursing home because of my grandmother, I loved it.
Yeah.
I actually loved it.
And they so much need that connection.
They do.
There's a lot of countries too that put young children with the elderly, which has found to be just so good for both of them. It teaches respect. It teaches, and then the kids with the, with the elderly, every time we lose a senior, look at all that history that we lose, all that. It's like losing a library.
Yeah.
But when you talk to them, because of how the brain works, we make new memories, form new memories in our hippocampus, and then it gets stored in different places around our brains. So that's why people can remember stuff from 30 years ago, but not from yesterday or not from 5 minutes ago. So you can still have a conversation with them about something that maybe happened in 1952, but they're going to remember it, and it can still be a very wonderful conversation. And they love sharing it. They like talking about themselves, about, their experiences. We just need to have enough patience and just love to sit there and listen.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. So what are some things that we can do? This podcast, again, Unraveled and Rising is really about kind of looking at different perspectives. It's about the unraveling. And even with a dementia thing, it could be the unraveling in a family when it first is happening. And then you adapt and figure out how to rise to that occasion, if you will. So I feel like, that's what we try to get across in this podcast.
Yes.
How we can not only look at ourselves and have some self-awareness and be able to change ourselves and grow ourselves, but also our communities and our families and what we're doing in those situations and how we can help grow in that as well, not just ourselves. But a lot of it always comes back to this. You know how it is, but
oh yeah. But me.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we'd love it if you guys could, like I said, we'll have some in the show notes here. We'll have a link to Kimberly's website and to her online course that you can learn more about dementia. She also, if you ever want to just have a conversation with her about it or something that's going on in your family, you can actually schedule with her on the website as well. So just click on the link to do that. If you need a speaker, if you need someone to come talk to a community or a group about dementia, Kimberly is really good at that. She's been doing that more and more, and she's out there speaking on the topic and just has so much knowledge. So consider that as well. And then also, as far as share this out with somebody who needs to hear it.
Yeah.
What's your Facebook group, Kimberly? That's the support Facebook group?
Caring Minds and Brain Changes.
Yeah. She has a Facebook group that you can belong to that can support each other, and she puts a lot of information in there.
Yeah.
But
yes.
Learn about it. Learn about dementia. Learn about what's going on in your community. Do some research on this subject and just see, if you ever have questions, you can comment below. Kimberly can answer those as we move forward. But it's really just starting to talk about it more so, and hopefully you'll feel better about it, and it won't be such a scary thing.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because it's not. I mean, it's happening right in front of us every single day. There's more and more people being diagnosed and living with dementia, not suffering with dementia, living with dementia.
Yeah.
And then their families who are their caregivers who are, and that's where some of the trauma stuff comes in, because they're having to take care of somebody that maybe didn't take such great care of them. So how can we support those folks as well? So it's really about love and empathy and compassion.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Thanks so much for watching today, guys. We appreciate it. And again, like, share, subscribe, share it with somebody else. We'd appreciate that. And we hope you have a wonderful week until we see you again. And any final thought there, Kimberly?
Now, let's just do what we can to just stop the stigma and support our caregivers.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, guys.
Bye.